So how's everything over there?
It's great, my friend. Thank you so much. How about you?
Everything's good. Everything's good. So first of all, can you introduce yourself for the audience?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Perry Nickelston, doctor of chiropractic, but I honestly do way more than that. I actually hesitate to call myself that because people automatically go to this mental file folder of what they think that I do. And I tell them, you're going to be 100% wrong. So, yeah, we'll get into that more as we explain my journey of my purpose in life and my brand, which is stop chasing pain. So I'm all about education now and helping people, treat pain, of course, but we fall into the trap of, pointing where it hurts and doing everything to where it hurts. And sometimes that helps, but usually you'll find it doesn't help for long. And hence why we have so much chronic pain around the world. Certainly chronic musculoskeletal pain, without a doubt. And I came to that conclusion a long time ago by being very frustrated of just doing lots of treatments and tools and stuff that I learned over the years to where it hurts, but people got temporary relief. And I was on the verge of quitting altogether because I was just so frustrated. And then that was my journey of looking into, well, I have a novel idea. How about I look at everywhere else where it doesn't hurt, including where it hurts? And I actually found people had a lot more problems that they didn't even realize they had because they were so focused on where it hurts. You follow? So, and then that's what brings me to what I do now.
Cool. So, uh, since you didn't just look at where it hurts, but you look like you more like like everything, like uh like you mentioned on the webinar for EBFA that everybody has a movement dysfunction. They just didn't know it yet. Is there any movement screen you use?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got my initial introduction into looking at movement through what's called the FMS. Some people may be familiar with that, the functional movement systems by my dear friends, Gray Cook and Lee Burton. And they started to try to put together some fundamental assessment that you can at least begin with to see, can you accomplish these basic human movements that everyone should be able to complete, right? And the hypothesis was that, well, if you're in pain, you probably won't be able to complete them because you're in pain. But maybe you have an issue with it that you can't complete them, and then that can cause your pain because you can't complete or perform the movement. So people always ask me, do you have a movement problem or issue because you're in pain, or do you have pain because you have a movement problem, movement issue? And the answer is yes. It goes both ways. So it's just simple fundamental ones that they introduced me to is what, can you stand with your feet together and bend over and touch your own toes? Yes or no? If you can't, that's an indication that there's some kind of restriction somewhere. You don't know what, but it can play a role over the course of the years of your lifetime. Well, yes, where yesterday you didn't have pain and then today you do out of nowhere, right? And interestingly enough, most humans can't touch their toes. And you should be able to touch your toes. Another one is, can you stand on one leg with one knee up in the air for a period of time, like 20 seconds, without falling over? If you can't do that, I'm going to tell you, you're going to be in a world of hurt at some point in your life. It's just a matter of when. And some people can do really awful on both sides, which often they do, or they'll do really great on one side and really not so great on another side. So I want you to think about that for a moment. Imagine if you had one good side on your car and one bad side on your car with your wheels. That ain't going to turn out too well, right? So I say to you that. And another one is, can you do a basic squat pattern? Like, can you pop a deep squat out of nowhere? And in order to do that, you have to have enough mobility in your ankle joint to accomplish that task. Most people do not. because they never do anything on purpose to pay attention or look at their ankles for one reason only, is because they don't hurt. And they're wearing shoes all the time, which we call foot coffins, because they kill your feet and the ability of your foot to communicate with your brain through sensory input. So those are just three fundamental ones that I ask people to do, and most people can't do it. So they don't know that they've got those dysfunctions. One, because nobody ever asked them to perform those tasks. You follow?
Yeah.
But it can build up over time. And then, say, for instance, what I'm going to contend is if you have a problem with those three things, that may be the reason that you can't get rid of your shoulder pain on one side, that everybody's been cranking on your shoulder for a year straight. Does that make sense? And then I realized when I was trying to put this puzzle piece together of, okay, people come into my office, they lay down on my table, and then I do a lot of stuff to them. So first of all, you have to think about that. They're laying down and they're not doing anything. I'm doing everything for them. So that's passive care. And then I would have them stand up, and then they would walk out and live their life again. And I thought to myself, well, what do they do a lot of when they get off my table? And I'm like, duh, it's right in front of me the whole time. They're moving. Or maybe they're not moving when they get home. They just sit down again. So I started to ask questions about their movement and look at fundamental movements. And then sometimes I found that they're moving, but they do the same kind of movements all the time. They don't do different kind of movements. So that's called repetitive micro trauma that people do. Same thing in sports or exercise. People do the same kind of sport all the time. Those athletes are going to get hurt. And sometimes it's just a part of doing the sport that you're in. And if you're going to be an athlete, you're going to have to deal with injuries and pain, especially if you want to be a monster. That's just the way it is. But that's about repetition. And it's the same thing for people that do exercise programs. We always like to do exercise programs that we enjoy and we're good at. We don't like to do the ones that we're not good at. So that's, for instance, that's the person, I love to do yoga. I'm so good at yoga. I'm like, yeah, that's because you're really flexible. And they don't really go into the weight room, to lift something really heavy off the floor. But then I have power lifters that are great at that, but they're not so good at yoga, and they don't want to do yoga because they're not good at yoga. So one of the biggest things that I tell people is just do things different than you're doing now, and you'll probably feel a little bit better. And then they say, what kind of different things? And I'm like, yes is the answer. It just better be different than what you're doing now. Because my definition of pain is this: pain is a request for change from your body. It's requesting that you change something, some habit, some behavior. One of the easiest things you can change is movement. Does that make sense? I know that was a really long answer to your question, but there was a lot there to unpack.
Cool, man. I love that. So, the part of the answer you said is like there's a like toe test and single leg balance test and ankle mobility, right? And you gave us an example that probably that's gonna link to like your shoulder pain, that kind of stuff. For the audience, who didn't know the knowledge behind this, can you kind of explain it? How does let's say ankle mobility or the toe test gonna affect the shoulder?
Great. Perfect question. So most important thing to remember is the body is not broken down into parts, even though we look at it that way. That's the way medicine works. If your ankle hurts, I'm going to look at your ankle. But it's an holistic system. It's the whole thing. You can't move your ankle without influencing every other part of your entire body, right? So I want you to imagine the very act of doing the most complicated movement pattern on the earth. We just take it for granted because we do it every day without thinking about it, even though it took us most of our early life to actually be able to do it. And that's walking. So when you walk, first of all, You're standing on one leg a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I better make sure how well can you even stand on one leg? Because if you take a lot of steps during the day and you have an issue with standing on one leg, that's a lot of impact going into the body that the body now has to control. And if you run, when you run, 100% of the time you're on one leg. So that's why in my world, if you can't stand on one leg for 20 seconds with your eyes open, you're going to get hurt when you run, because you're adding force and impact from the ground traveling up into a system where you can't control it when you're standing still, for goodness sakes. And then when you're running, you're not just hopping on one leg, right? When one leg is on the ground, what's the other one doing? It's up in the air and it's swinging, right? And then what else are you moving? Hopefully, your arms, right? So your arms work together, and then you twist in the torso, right? And then you have to control the motion of your head so your head doesn't flop around like a bobble doll and then you lose your head. Okay. So you have what they call this contralateral cross body connection patterning. So your left leg works with everything else, but your left leg and your right arm swing together, right? And then your right leg and your left arm swing together, right? And so everything works as a unit, okay? That's the ability so you can generate force. So I want you to think about this for a moment, and sometimes you can even feel it. It's better to feel stuff than just listen. But if you are standing and you put your left foot forward, right? And then if you're saying, you would bring your right arm forward with it, right? So that's like a run. So left leg forward, right arm forward. Then your left arm is back and your right leg is back. So now I want you to think about the ankle on the left that's forward. Pardon me. That force has got to travel up through your ankle, through your knee, through your hip, into your center, cross over. Sorry, I'm choking.
It's okay. It's okay.
I get so excited. I can't talk. You mind pausing it for a second?
Okay. Okay.
You'll have to edit that out.
Okay.
My apologies.
No worries, man. No worries.
Okay. Let's see if I can get this out now. All right. So we're talking about if your left foot is forward, that's going to be getting the impact from the ground. That force coming from the ground is called an impact force. Energy has to travel somewhere. So it's going to go up that leg to your knee, to your hip, and it's going to go into your pelvis. It's going to go across the body it's going to go everywhere, but it's going to bleed out mostly through the opposite side arm, because that's the cross body pendulum that gives you power. So your shoulder is attached to that arm. So what I want you to imagine is that if you have an inability to balance well on your left foot, when I had you stand on it, then I know that you don't have good, what they call stability, which means you can't control movement, which a lot of people have. So stability is the ability to resist movement, right? And then maybe you have an ankle mobility problem, which means the ankle is supposed to move a lot, but it doesn't. So you have poor motion in your ankle and you have poor control on the bottom of the foot called stability. Well, that's going to affect the whole system all the way up. And so what you might end up doing is that you might overuse the opposite side shoulder to make up for the loss that you have in your foot and your ankle, but you don't know you've lost it. You understand? You don't know that it's there because nobody ever had you squat or stand on one leg. Meanwhile, when you run, you're overusing your right arm. Maybe I'm going to give you an arbitrary number. Let's say it has to work 20% harder because your left ankle and foot don't work well. But you're not going to notice it. But you're going to notice it days, weeks, months, and years. And then all of a sudden, you're going to say, hey, doc, my right shoulder hurts, and nobody can fix my right shoulder. So, because they've been looking at what? The right shoulder. And then what I'm going to do is glue across the body and look on the opposite side to see if there's an issue. And usually you're going to find it, but you might not either, because that relationship is possible, but it doesn't mean it's the only one. You follow? That makes sense?
Yeah.
So what I have to do is check it, though. And if you can do those things, well, perfect. It doesn't mean that you're not going to get hurt either, though. You understand?
Yeah.
Just because you can move great and pass all my tests doesn't mean that you might not get hurt, because that just happens. But what I'm going to contend is, if you struggle to touch your toes, you struggle to stand on one leg, and you struggle to do a deep squat, you're probably increasing your chances of getting hurt at some point in time. But what you're definitely going to increase is the amount of effort it takes you to move over time, which means you're going to get tired and fatigued and lethargic and have less durability, less power, less strength. And then maybe that's the difference on you winning or losing your event that you're trying to compete in. Or maybe it's the difference between you being able to perform what you love to do every day because it brings you joy. Right. So I think it's an important part that we can introduce here. Something that you wanted to talk about is mobility and stability.
Yeah.
So let's explain those terms, and then I'm going to go over what's called, you may be familiar with it. Some people are, some people aren't. It's called the joint by joint theory of movement by Gray Cook and Mike Boyle, who formulated that, by the way, on a napkin at a bar. And I know it because they told me. Some of the greatest works in fitness came on a napkin at a bar. At least they did from Gray Cook, because he created the functional movement screen on a napkin, but on an airplane at that time.
Shit.
So the lesson here is to invest in napkins, and you'll get some brain candy. So stability is the ability to resist movement, control movement. And then mobility is the ability to actually move. So you have to have the ability to move in order to gain stability over it. Does that make sense? So think of a baby. A baby has a lot of movement, but not a lot of control. So they have a ton of mobility, but they don't have a lot of stability. So they have to work towards that stability by moving and doing a lot of stuff on the ground, because you're not going to be able to walk if you don't have a mixture of mobility and stability. So that's why when they start to walk, they start to walk, but then they begin to run and then they fall because they can't control it yet. Right. So, but here's the thing people need to realize, that each joint in your body needs both. It needs stability and mobility, and how much you need at one point changes depending on what you're asking your body to do at the moment in time, the task you're asking it to accomplish, which means at one point in time, maybe it's going to give your ankle more mobility, but other time it's going to give it more stability, but you have to have the availability for both. You follow?
Yeah.
So I got to make sure you've got it. So these are err on the side of joints in your body tend to have more of one than the other overall. So let's go from the bottom up. Now, the bottom of your foot needs to be mobile, but it's mostly supposed to be stable. And that makes sense, right? I mean, I want a stable surface when I stand on it. And Paul Chek, who's the father of functional training, said stability always precedes force production. So if you want to generate force, you need to have a stable base to do it. And he says, this one, his analogy was, you can't shoot a cannon from a canoe because the ball ain't going to get very far because you don't have a stable base. You understand?
Yeah.
So when I have you stand on one leg, I'm testing your canoe is what I'm doing. So you need to have stability standing on the bottom of your foot. That's why flat-footed people have a lot of issues, because they don't have a stable base. And then you're supposed to have a lot of mobility in the big toe. So your big toe should move a lot, particularly in extension. That means bending it backwards up towards your nose. You need about 65 degrees of big toe motion if you want to be able to generate power all the way up to your arms. Because when you lose mobility in the big toe, you're going to lose the ability to have range of motion that you need in your hip. So just a little bit of a bonus here, all hip issues and back issues, you need to check the big toe in the foot. So now the ankle itself, so you have mobility in the big toe, stability in the bottom of the foot, and now you need mobility in your ankle mobility. But you have a lot of ligaments in your ankle because it's supposed to remain stable as well. Okay, but it needs to move. Most people have very poor ankle mobility. And if you have that, you are going to suffer with issues from the ankle up. Hard stop period, zero debate, right? You always have to check both sides. Now we move up to the knee joint. The knee joint is supposed to be very stable, right? So that moves a lot, but you want it moving in what they call flexion and extension. That's like sitting down and doing a leg extension machine or a hamstring curl. Where you don't want it moving a lot is from inside to outside or twisting. Because if you got that, you're going to have a meniscus tear or an ACL tear quick, fast, and in a hurry. So the knee needs to be very stable, right? Then you move up to the hip, and the hip is supposed to be stable and mobile, but it's supposed to be more mobile because you want to be able to bring your knee high up in the air. I want to be able to extend my hip really far back. I want to be able to turn my leg in and out, right? So from there, I want you to think about that relationship. What you're probably already seeing is a theme here, where you have stable joints stacked with mobile joints, stacked with stable joints. They alternate with each other, right? And we'll go back to, and I'll give you some examples if we have time, but what can go wrong with this system. I don't even like to use the word wrong, but I'm going to say what adaptations or compensations your body will do to try to protect you based on this relationship. So your lower, you're supposed to be mobile in your hip, but you're supposed to be stable in your lower back. Stability in your lower back. That's one reason why breathing through the diaphragm is so important, because that gives you low back stability when you breathe through your diaphragm. Now, your thoracic spine, which is the rib cage part, that's supposed to be really freaking mobile. And that's the number one place that people lose mobility that they don't know that they lost. If you lose mobility in your rib cage, you're going to have a lot more movement in the four corners, your shoulders and your hips. All right. And if you don't have mobility in that hip, guess what? You're in big trouble, because you lost the mobility there and you lost the mobility in your thoracic spine. Guess what sits in the middle that pays the price? Your low back.
Yeah.
Right? Because your low back is supposed to be stable. But now it can't be stable because it has to do the motion that you lost in your hip and you lost in your rib cage. So that's what I'm saying is, if your low back hurts, people start cranking on the lower back. And I'm like, well, hold on a second. You got to make sure that you look at the hips and you got to look at the rib cage. If you walk in to see me and you're asking me for help, I already know your rib cage sucks. That's why you're standing in front of me asking me for help. I just have to see how bad it is. Right? Because very rarely does somebody say, Doc, I got to see you. My rib cage is killing me. No, it's somewhere else, right? So then let's look up from there. The shoulders have to be very mobile, right? Does that make sense? Because I need to reach over my head, and I got to reach across the body, behind the body, and all this sort of stuff. And most people can't even reach over their head.
Yeah.
So first of all, they usually don't do anything over their head because they don't have to. And then the scapula, the shoulder blade, that's supposed to be really stable, but also very mobile. So that's the one that kind of crisscrosses a lot with each other. So a lot of people don't have the stability in the shoulder blade. Right? And then you need to have a lot of mobility in your wrists. So your wrists need to move a lot because I got to grab stuff. And then the elbow is supposed to be very stable. Think of the elbow as the exact same joint as your knee joint. Okay. Then we're almost there. Now the neck is interesting. The neck you have to break up into different sections too. You have 7 bones in your neck called cervical 1, cervical 2, all the way down to 7. The top 2 are called your atlas and your axis. The top of the head, your skull, is called your occiput. Okay. Here's what's cool to know. The upper part of your neck, the skull and the first 2 bones, are supposed to have a lot of mobility, a lot. Most of the movement in your neck comes from those 3 bones. 50% of the ability to move your head any direction comes from the top 3 bones. The rest of them, right? The rest of them, number 3 through 7, is supposed to be very stable. Stable. Most people have all of those things completely reversed. What's supposed to be stable is now mobile. What's supposed to be mobile is now stable. And the body's doing that, first of all, because it has no choice to, because it's got to protect you. And it does the best it can with what it's got in the moment it's in to protect you. And you have to control all of that energy that you're trying to deal with through exercise, through movement, or through gravity all the time, right? So does that make sense? Because I can break it down and show you how one simple issue with the ankle joint will cause, we kind of did it already, but I'll do the same thing with any joint, havoc throughout the whole system. But we micromanage and reduce everything down to a particular area that a person may be suffering with pain or mobility issue, stability issue in a single place. And I want you to, from now on, say to yourself, there's no such thing as a single place in the body. Okay.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, when I came across that the first time, my head exploded. I was like, that's the coolest thing in the world I've ever seen, because that's what Stop Chasing Pain came from, that fundamental foundation of, I was in healthcare. I was trained to look at the body, but I was unfortunately trained very myopically to look at areas and do things there. And then the most novel thing I got from Gray Cook in that world was looking at outside of the pain for how well they can move, because those are going to be the underlying driving forces in the area that is painful, that's not going away.
Yeah.
And they call that non-painful dysfunctional. So what that means is that there's areas that have some dysfunction to it, which means that they might be not enough stability, not enough mobility, but it's not painful. But it's causing pain somewhere else because of the body having to adapt and figure out, and geez, how am I going to move around this area that you've got so that you don't feel pain in it, right? But it only has so many ways that it can compensate without sending you pain, because it's run out of ideas to say, listen, I'm trying to help you, Perry, here so you don't feel pain, but I got nothing left in my tank. So I need you to do something to help me out here. So I'm going to hurt you, and I'm going to hurt you now. And unfortunately, we go after where it hurts, and the body gets really frustrated because it's like, dude, I mean, I get why you're going where it hurts, but it's not just there, man. I need you to think, you got to think bigger than that. And you only figure that out. You only figure that out when you've had chronic pain for so long and nothing helps the traditional way.
Yeah.
That means you have to think differently. You have to be Apple, think different. And then that helps you, because that's the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over, hoping to get a different result. If you give your body what it needs to make a difference for the better and help you get well, it'll tell you really quickly if you got it right.
Yeah.
If you don't get it, it'll tell you that too, which means you're going to stay the same.
True. That's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So that's why I look at movement, because if you can't perform a squat, I'm looking at all of those things in one shot. Right. That's why the FMS even challenges that more. They have you do what's called an overhead squat. So an overhead squat is basically where you would separate your legs to about shoulder width apart. You place your hands up over your head, and some people can't even do that.
Yeah.
If they place their hands up over their head, it's almost impossible because one, they've got no motion in their shoulder. Two, their neck is so jammed up that when they put their hands over their head, they have to bring their head about 3 feet forward. And then they can't round or get motion in the thoracic spine and the rib cage. So what happens is that they lean backwards and they arch the lower back. So the hands go over the head, but they're getting it from everywhere else but the shoulder. And then I'm going to say, okay, now squat. And the nervous system is going, are you freaking kidding me? That's like so. And you know, you need your quote unquote core stability, you know, the ability to control anything in the midline is the core, in my opinion. And all of that with a squat. I'm going to tell you right now that the majority of most humans on this earth, including high functional, high end athletes, can't accomplish that task.
True. Yeah. So true.
And sometimes it's based on anatomy. Like some people have different shape of their what's called their femur joint, how the leg angles into the pelvis. So those are the people that they're not going to be able to do a squat with the toes forward no matter how much you train them, because the anatomy just won't take them there.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of the stuff you have to keep in mind is individual for people, because it's based on what their ability for their system that they were born with or is adapted to over time will now allow them to do.
Cool, man. Love this.
Oh, I do too. It's so cool. It's so cool. And what you'll find is that when you start to, you still take care of where somebody hurts, but you need to look elsewhere. And at that point, it could be, okay, so how would we maybe go after what you've got? Well, your right shoulder is hurting, but let's try to get you a little bit more mobility and stability in the opposite side hip. So we can do some hip mobility exercises, and there's like an endless supply of those. But you have to remember something. When an area of your body has a decreased mobility motion, okay, you can give it back to it, but it's really hard for the body to maintain what you gave it.
Yeah.
So which means that it'll take away that mobility really quickly if you haven't taught it how to control its new movement pattern. So if I can give a lot of motion in your hip, but I haven't trained stability on top of that, then as soon as you start to stress yourself, you're going to lose mobility again. You're going to lose mobility again. So I discovered that in my work I did a lot of stuff on a table, right? So I want you to think about this. When you lie down on a table, everything relaxes. You don't need stability when you're on the table because you're not fighting gravity anymore. You're just laying there. So everything relaxes. Okay? Then I'm going to go after mobility. I'm going to stretch you. I'm going to manipulate you. I'm going to do all these tools to loosen up what? Tight tissue. And then I want you to ask yourself, why in the hell is your tissue tight in the first place? Well, it's tight to give you protection, and it's tight to give you, hold on for it, stability. So tight tissue is a mechanism that your nervous system uses to give you stability, right? Because it says, listen, if you can't control it, I'm going to take it away from you, is basically what it's telling you. Yeah. Like, dude, you can't control your hip, so I'm going to not let you move your freaking hip, because if you move your hip, you're going to hurt yourself, and I don't want to be hurt either. So where my error happened was that I was doing all the stuff on the table, and then I would say, okay, you're done, pop off the table and go. Wrong, right? Because I gave you all that motion, but as soon as you stand up, you have the full weight of your body and the earth crushing down on a nervous system that says, holy crap, I don't know what to do here. So when it doesn't know what to do, it goes back to what it's always been doing. You understand? What that means is it goes back to exactly the same pattern I'm trying to take away, trying to improve and take away. So that's when you keep getting the same thing over and over and over. So all I started to do was I just had you begin to do some strength control moves while you're on the table. Isometric work while you're on the table. Basic movement patterns, maybe while you're on the table or you're on the ground. So in that case, what I would do is, in my world, I could mobilize your ankle. I could take away the tension in your calf. I can move your hip. I can strip your psoas muscle. And then I'm going to have you do 25 hip raises with abduction with a band on before you jump off my table. You understand why? Because now I gave you the motion that I'm going to give you a little bit of load and a little bit of stability. Then I can have you come off the table and then stand on one leg. That's something that I just discovered over time of, man, I'm doing this stuff, but it's supposed to work, but it's not working because I was doing too much. So the lesson of this story is I usually want people to, the first thing you want to go after most of the time is helping increase mobility in areas of the body that you've lost it in, that you didn't realize you lost it in. So when you're listening to this, I tell people, try to make sure that you have good motion in your big toe, your ankle, your hip, your rib cage, front and back. Remember that. Your thoracic spine, and your wrists, and your upper neck. And here's what I found. I got some people that's got mobility problems in every single damn one of those. And you wonder why you're hurt.
Yeah.
You wonder why. Two of the biggest ones are the ankle, because it's closest to the foundation. And the other one is the upper neck because it's closest to your brain.
True. Get it, man. Get it. That was a cool answer. And a long one.
Thank you. Well, I learned from a lot of really smart people, and tried to bring my own experiences to it, my own things that I've learned. And that's one of the lessons that I teach people when I do classes, is that I'm going to teach you a lot of stuff that I've learned from others, that I'm going to bring things that I've learned and brought to it that I found from my own unique perspective. And I want you to do the same with what I'm teaching you.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've failed as a teacher if you feel you have to do everything like I just did it. That's not how things change or things improve or even science changes. I need you to maybe say, what if, or can I, or ask a different question. So you take it and then you bring you to it. And then
man.
you may find a better way than I found it.
True. Love that. So I'm gonna jump into the next topic, which you kind of talk a little about it, but still, like you mentioned on the webinar on EBFA, but anyway, you said that gait is rolling pattern, but just standing up. How so?
Yeah, first of all, I'm going to give props to my good friend Charlie Weingroff. Some people may know him. He came up with that little phrase at a workshop we did in New York for something, and he said, "Walking is just rolling, standing up." And I said, "That's really cool," because first of all, people kind of need to understand what rolling patterns are, and you've got a lot of different rolling patterns, and it's really simple. You're going to roll in different ways. So when you're on the ground, you can actually, and I think of rocking too. You can actually rock like front to back. You know, when you lie on your back and you curl your knees up into like a little ball and you roll like that. You have forward rolls and backwards rolls that you see a lot in rolling and tumbling drills, or people that do wrestling, some of the cool stuff that you see with gymnastica natural or animal flow, stuff like that. But you can also roll, side to side like that. And a rolling pattern is where, and I've got several videos on this, by the way, on YouTube. And I learned these fundamental techniques initially from Gray Cook, because rolling patterns came from the world of physical therapy. They used it with stroke rehabilitation because they found that it really significantly impacted how the brain can recover and regenerate from rolling, because it mimics a walking. The way it works is that you would lie on your back and you're going to roll over to your stomach, and then you lie on your stomach and then you roll back over to your back. But in order to do it, we instruct you to do it one arm at a time, one leg at a time, making your way through both arms and both legs. And what you're going to find is that most people cannot do it. One, because you need good mobility to actually do it. If you don't have mobility in your neck and in your thoracic spine and in your shoulder and in your hip, you're going to struggle to roll. But if you do have that, you need to be able to control that movement. And if you don't have good, what they call core control or cross body control, it's called cross body generators, or central pattern generators, excuse me, in neurology. That's the linkage of opposite side arm to opposite side leg. Okay. Contralateral movement patterns. You can see, if you type in rolling patterns and my name, Perry Nickelston, on YouTube, you'll see a lot of different variations. And I've written a lot of articles about it as well that you can access just by searching rolling patterns and my name. So let me give you an example of what it looks like. I would ask somebody to lie down on their back, and we start with the legs first because it's easier, because you don't have to use your head as much. So I'm going to ask you to lay down on your back. I'm going to say, put your arms up over your head. So legs are straight, arms are straight. I'm going to say, raise your right leg up in the air like you're taking a step, but you're lying on your back. And then bring that leg over your body and let that bring you to your stomach. So the only thing that's going to bring you there is that leg. And then the rest of your body is going to come after that. Right? Then when you're on your stomach, I'm going to say, take the same leg, the right leg, and then extend it backwards, and then bring it over the left leg and try to bring yourself back to your back. So if you don't have hip mobility, it's going to be hard to do that. And then I'll say, do the same thing with the left leg. Most people can't do it. But if they do, one side is different than the other. Now I'm going to send home why it's like walking. Okay. One is because that's how babies had to move, is rocking and rolling and tumbling. So you can get the stability and the strength and the patterning in the body, so you can actually stand up and walk. Right. So people have gait issues and walking and running issues when they skip developmental milestones when they were younger as an infant to be able to rock or sit or scoot or roll, stuff like that. Pardon me. So let's show you how the upper body works. Now I'm going to say, I want you to use your arms to bring yourself over to your stomach. So with this one, you would raise your right arm up and over to go across your body, and you're going to get stuck. Okay. Because you have to use your head and your neck on this one. But if you get stuck like midway, what you're going to find is your body's going to try to cheat. It's going to try to compensate and move something else to get you over. So if you don't have good stability and strength in your abdomen region, your core, and what they call your transverse abdominis, your oblique muscles, then you're going to get stuck and you're going to be, holy cow, I can't get over to my stomach. So if I'm using my right arm to get over and you get stuck, what you're going to find is that my left leg is automatically lifting off the ground to help me get over. So when I'm trying to bring my right arm over, because if you lie down on the ground and you try to bring your right arm over, you'll feel it happen. Then your left leg will come up in what they call flexion, like you're taking a step. So you'll, what I say, cheat by using your left leg because you can't get it from your right arm or your abdomen. And that ties back into what I said before. That left leg is not supposed to come up. All right. But it's coming up because you can't do it with what you need to be able to do it, which is your right shoulder and your abdomen. So what does that look like? Right arm forward, left leg forward, right leg back, left arm back. That looks like walking, because that's exactly what walking is. The opposite side arm and the opposite side leg work together in flexion and extension. That means forward and backwards. So now imagine you're having to do that lying on the ground where you're hardly fighting any gravity. Now I want you to stand up and I want you to run. When you stand up and you run, you're fighting gravity and you're having to have a lot of stabilization. That's max stabilization. And what I'm going to tell you is that I know, because of that rolling pattern, most of your work is happening from the left leg that's trying to do the work for you. That means this. That's the person that says, Doc, my left knee always hurts. My left psoas is always tight. My left hip always has pain. And everybody works the hip, and I stretch the hip, and I do all these sorts of different things. You know, I do a lot of glute work. And I'm like, that's great. But then I'm going to say, get down on the ground, lie flat, put your arms over your head, let your legs stay straight. And I want you to try to bring your right arm over to lie on your stomach. And I'm going to look for one thing. What does that left leg do? And if I see the left leg move, what I'm going to tell you is this. There's no way you're going to get better with that left leg because it's something higher up that we need to get. All right. I know that was a long explanation, but I got to tell you something. If you can just do a rolling pattern first, because when you feel it, all this stuff I just told you will make sense. But then when you understand all the stuff that has to happen for you to do a rolling pattern, it gives you a new respect for ground-based training, first of all. So that's why most, if not all, of my rehabilitation moves are ground-based. Because if you can't control your own body mass on the ground, you're going to fall apart when you freaking stand up. You just don't know it because you've become really good at covering it up when you stand up. But you're not going to cover anything up when I get your ass on the ground. It's going to show up quick, fast, and in a hurry. And one, you're going to notice it too. And two, you're going to be freaking exhausted with those movements, right? So if you can own your body mass on the ground with these fundamental patterns, you're going to notice that when you stand up, you say, wow, I feel like I have more power. I feel like I have less effort to move. It's more efficient. I can go harder, faster, stronger, longer, # beast mode. And all I had to do was work that ankle, work that rib cage, do a couple of rolling patterns. It can't be that simple. And I'm like, well, who the hell told you that? Of course it can be, because I'm just taking you back to the basics and the fundamentals of how you learn to move in the first place. Where did you learn to move in the first place? You didn't learn to move standing up. I'll tell you that much. You learned to move on the ground. So I'm just going to take you back there. And it's really, really powerful, the differences that it makes. It takes a lot of practice on that one, man. I'm going to tell you, it's going to take you years to really understand how rolling patterns work. I mean, if you care to go down that rabbit hole like me, because it's what you love to do and you're a geek, you'll have a newfound respect for how just one area in the body, when you lose the ability to move it or keep it stable, can cause an issue anywhere else in the body. Full body, holistic, whole thing. So the functional movement screen has some fundamental basic patterns in it beyond those three. Like, can you do a push-up or not? That's a big one. What the mobility is in your shoulder as well. So those are just additional ones, but those are the big three that I do. And you have to be careful where you start too. So what I usually have people end up starting with first is just a single leg stance. That lets me know, because I know that if you, I'm going to review this one again. It's one of the first ones I do. I have people stand with shoes off, no socks, feet together so they touch. So when you do that, you automatically narrow your base of support, which when you do that, you need more what? Stability, right? Then I'm going to have you stand there, and then I'm going to watch how your posture changes, because when you put your feet together, your twist and your turn and your rib cage shows up. Then I'm going to have you look straight ahead, and then I'm going to take away your safety net. I'm going to have you close your eyes. And when people close their eyes like that, they should be perfectly still. What you're going to see is that people sway side to side, front to back, or they go in circles, or they feel like they're going to fall. That, my friend, is telling you already there's no way in hell you're going to get a squat from the right place. Then I'm going to tell you, okay, now we got 2 feet on the ground. Let's do 1 foot off the ground. Right? And I do that because I need to see which side is the most dysfunctional side. Right? And so then I'm going to say, I'll tell the person, I want you to raise 1 leg up in the air and balance on 1 foot. And I'm not going to tell them which one to start with. Why would you think I would do that? Because I want to see which one their brain wants to use first, which tells me the most important information. It tells me the side that you did not want to use. Right? So if you choose to stand on your left leg, that automatically tells me your brain likes your left leg more than your right leg. So I already found a possible weak link. Right? It can also be because it's your dominant leg, but that tells me a lot too. Then I'm going to say, okay, raise your, so they say they're standing on their left leg and they raise their right knee in the air like they're stepping over something high, eyes open. You should be able to hold that with eyes open 30 seconds easy. 30 seconds easy. That means your arms aren't flailing around like you're falling out of the sky with no parachute. I mean, you need to be stable. And then if you can do that, now I'm going to take away your safety net. I'm going to say, close your eyes. And then most people go timber, they fall right over. Right? And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Because eyes closed, you should be able to hold that 20 seconds easy. Most people will last 5 to 10, if that. Right? That means you have the inability to control movement. So there's a lot of different systems that we have to look at, but I automatically know I'm going to get you into rolling patterns. Get you into rolling patterns with that one. Okay. So that's a fundamental test that we do. So we start with that one. Then I'll do a toe touch test. And then I'll do an overhead squat one. I do it in that order.
Oh, really love that. It's a long answer, but I really love that.
Yeah. It's just simple ones, fundamental ones that you should do with, you don't have to be a high performance athlete to do those assessments. You need to do those assessments no matter where you are in your life, particularly if you have chronic musculoskeletal pain. You need to be able to do that. Because if you have chronic musculoskeletal pain, you can rest assured that it's crept its way into the brain, and the brain has developed a lot of protective compensation patterns in order to protect you over time. And then, so we need to reveal that with those particular tests. See, in my world, often I can't do an overhead squat with people because they're in pain. So I don't put you through an assessment like that if it hurts you.
Yeah.
Because I already know something's wrong because you're hurt.
Yeah. Cool. Get it. That was great, man. But yeah. So wait a sec. Last thing. Is there, if there's like any people or any coaches who are interested in what we're talking about it, where can they reach out to you?
Really simple. So, Stop Chasing Pain is my business name, brand name. It's kind of who I am. If you type that into any search engine, it'll show up, and then it'll take you to my website. And that's the central hub for everything, for all that I do, from my social media to my courses. And you'll also be able to find through Google search with just my name a lot of articles and videos and stuff that I've published over the years. I've been putting out content since the internet started, for goodness sakes. So like I've been in the game that long. So, when we still had freaking dial up, I've been putting out content. So you start there, and most of my time is probably spent on Instagram. It's my favorite venue for sharing information. I'm just venturing into TikTok a little bit, but I only have so much time that I can do things like that. And I highly encourage people to, follow some of the stuff that we mentioned already of my good friends, Gray Cook and Lee Burton from the Functional Movement Screen or Functional Movement Systems. And then they have a more of a medical based side that people can go through that's called the SFMA, the Selective Functional Movement Assessment. That one will train you how to be more of a detective, like I showed you, for dealing with people in pain. So the FMS is more of a performance assessment. The SFMA is where you need to go when you're dealing with pain, and you can do a lot more stuff under your scope of what you can do depending on where you are in the world and your capabilities. But yeah, you start with the FMS and then you work to the SFMA. Because you start with the SFMA first, it might melt your brain a little bit, but the FMS you can start with. And I always intermix that fundamental approach to what I do with all of my other stuff.
Cool. Appreciate it, man.
Yes. Thank you very much for having me on.
I mean,
good.
Although it kind of like the basic stuff, and I thought I know it already, but I really learned a lot today.
Well, that's wonderful. And I always say is that you can never know the basics and fundamentals too much.
Yeah.
Because how well you understand those influences how well you understand anything after that. All the greatest athletes and greatest coaches are all about basics,
yeah.
Right?
So true.
The wannabes don't get it yet.
Yeah.
But you're also forever a student. You're always learning. And here's something I learned a long time ago is that from Dan John, who Coach Dan John is a good friend of mine. He says that, you have to keep your mind open to learning, because once you hear something that's fundamental and basic, a lot of people just brush it off and they say, I already know that. Well, first of all, that's not saying a lot about you as a learner and a teacher, first of all. Okay. But when you hear something again that you've heard before, you actually might get something completely new out of it, because hopefully you're not the same person you are today the last time you heard it. And you'll say, wow, you know what? I never thought about it like that. Or what I even discovered is that somebody can tell you the same information, but it's the way that they communicated it to you. It's their spin on it. It's their experience that now it resonates more with you because of the person that told it to you was different. You understand?
Yeah.
That's really important for people to understand in coaching and athletics. That's why if you've ever seen any great coach, they always say, I'm going to make you do free throws until you want to kill yourself, right? And I'm going to make you do like the Karate Kid, wax on, wax off, sand the floor, paint the fence, so much that you're like, I want to quit. Okay, now you're starting to get what it takes to go to the next level. And that's what we covered today.
Yeah.
A lot of the wax on, wax off, sand the floor, paint the fence. Like standing on one leg is sand the floor.
It's great stuff. It's great stuff. Appreciate it, man.
You got it. Thanks for having me on. It was a good time.
Yeah. So,